Chairman Nadler, excuse me, Ranking Member Collins. The last time I appeared before your committee was July 11, 1974, during the impeachment inquiry of Richard Nixon. Clearly, I'm not here today as a fact witness. I accepted the invitation to come here today because I hope I can give a little historical perspective on the Mueller report. In many ways, the Mueller report is to President Trump what the so-called Watergate Roadmap, officially titled the Grand Jury Report and Recommendation Concerning Transmission of Evidence to the House of Representatives, was to President Richard Nixon. Stated a little differently, Special Counsel Mueller has provided this committee with a roadmap. Drawing from my testimony, I'd like to offer a few, actually just one I'm going to focus on, parallels I find with the Mueller report. I've laid out in my prepared statement 6 examples. Those examples are illustrative rather than exhaustive. But let me turn to the 6th, and anybody who has any question about the prior 5, I'm happy to address. The 6th is the Mueller report's effort regarding the influence of witnesses with pardons. As the citation shows, it's spread out throughout the report. Mr. Mueller addresses the question of whether President Trump dangled pardons or offered favorable treatment to Michael Cohen, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen, and Roger Stone, whose name is actually redacted, but based on educated conjecture, I think that's pretty clear who it is. And the question is whether in return for their pardons, they agreed to, or the suggestion of a pardon, he was seeking them to keep their silence, and how they coordinated with investigators. But also the Mueller report offers a very powerful legal analysis that, notwithstanding the fact that the pardon power is one of the most unrestricted presidential powers, it cannot be used for improper purposes. And I give the cite of that argument. What's interesting is Richard Nixon, who used the pardon in a similar way, recognized that it was improper. For example, in December of 1972, Chuck Colson went in to see the president to get a pardon, a commitment for Howard Hunt, who he had been responsible in bringing into the White House and whose wife had recently died in a crash and felt he couldn't withstand a trial and didn't want to spend the rest of his life in jail, so he was seeking a pardon assurance from Chuck Colson. The president reluctantly agreed to do that. And when Hunt was given the word, the so-called Cuban Americans who were part of the Watergate operation, they also took their cue from Hunt and pled. In my March 21st conversation with Nixon, we got into the subjects of pardons, and he at that point said he very clearly understood to grant pardons it would be wrong. I cite the actual exchange from that conversation. There's one that I did not cite in here is I learned in a later tape that Ehrlichman had been asked by the president to offer me a pardon to protect me and hopefully encourage me from not breaking rank. Ehrlichman knew that was wrong, so he didn't offer that pardon. In one of my last conversations with Richard Nixon, he told me in a very peculiar manner, getting up from his desk in the EOB office and going across the office and in a stage whisper saying to me, "John, I made a mistake in talking to Colson about clemency for Hunt, didn't I?" And I said, "Yes, Mr. President, that was probably obstruction of justice." When Haldeman and Ehrlichman were departing, they pled with the White House that they be given pardons. I think because Nixon knew he could only compound his situation at that point, that he refused to even entertain the request. Finally, let me close on the note, and I explain this at some length, that I certainly hope Don McGahn is a key witness before this committee. Because of my testimony, the model code of the ABA today makes very clear in Rule 1.13 that Mr. McGahn represents not Donald Trump, but the office of the President. His client is the office of the President, and I think he owes that office his testimony before